Well, this past week there were a couple thousand people. They boarded a ship, a big cruise ship in Yokohama, Japan. So right outside of Tokyo, and so if you're picturing this part of the world, um, this is Japan over here, China's over here, and so they board the ship, and come to find out, on the previous voyage that this ship took, there's a man from Hong Kong. And so in Hong Kong, there's this thing called the coronavirus. And so this man in Hong Kong, he was diagnosed with the coronavirus, and he just got off this big ship, and the ship was going back to Japan, Tokyo, to pick up some more people and do a whole nother cruise. And so all these people, they board this ship. 3,700 people are on this ship. Come to find out, coronavirus is alive and well on this ship. And so what they had to do is they have to quarantine these people in the middle of this harbor. So they're just sitting there on this ship in the middle of the harbor outside of Tokyo, and they're just stuck there. They're being quarantined now for 2 weeks, so that people can go in, medical experts can go in, kind of diagnose the people that have coronavirus, the people that don't have coronavirus, maybe take them out, test them to see if they have it, so that they can be released out into the world. Because obviously, if there's a concentrated coronavirus population here in this boat, they're going to go out to the rest of the world, right? And they're going to go infest the whole world with this coronavirus. And so they got to be super careful with this. And so this 3,700 people, they're sitting there in the middle of this harbor in Tokyo, Japan, and they're stuck for 14 days. I don't know if you've ever been on a cruise before. And I've been on a cruise one time, and the rooms on the cruise ship are pretty small. You can't leave. You're quarantined. You can't leave your room. So you can't go get ice cream. You can't go to the all-you-can-eat buffet upstairs. You can't go to the mini golf on the roof. Like, you can't do any of that. You have to stay in your room for 2 straight weeks. And so these people are kind of going crazy. There's lots of Americans on board, and they're doing all these interviews on FaceTime and all that kind of stuff. But this is a pretty big deal because, like I said, there are 3,700 people on this ship. Already 70 of those 3,700 people are already diagnosed with coronavirus, because it's just going around, people, touching the bathroom door handles, or the mini golf clubs, or the ice cream machine, or whatever. Coronavirus, it's everywhere on the ship. And so this virus is centralized right here in this small confined space. And so all these people are freaking out. And so these people, I was watching a couple interviews with some of these people on this cruise, and they're in their rooms, they're stuck there, and they're like, we're being extremely careful. We're not going outside. I think they sometimes let like a group of people go out and get fresh air for like 15 minutes and then come right back to the room. They're really cracking down on these people. And so these people are going crazy, and they're freaking out, and they're being extra careful with washing their hands. They're being extra careful with, the air that they breathe in. They're being extra careful with not touching their face or their nose, so they don't get the coronavirus. Because if it's going crazy on this ship, they know that the danger is right there. And so they've got to have a heightened alertness for washing their hands, for making sure that they are not going to get this sickness. They're doing everything that they possibly can to keep themselves unstained, if you will, or not come into contact with this coronavirus. And so I think when we turn open to the book of James here this morning, I want you guys to flip on over to James chapter 4. And I think James paints a very similar picture to that cruise ship. All these people are stuck on the cruise ship. They're being extra careful that they're not going to be unstained with all this stuff that's going on around this boat, this virus, killing people. I mean, there's already, I was reading that there's like 30 to 40,000 people in this world diagnosed with the coronavirus, and already like 800 people have already died. This is, I know we sometimes laugh about it because coronavirus is in Irvine, and it's kind of scary, but 800 people have died from this already. So it's actually kind of a big deal. And so these people are being extra careful with it. And James here this morning, he's going to tell us that we need to be extra careful as we're stuck here we're quarantined, if you will, on this planet. You can't leave this planet. You're stuck here, just like that boat is stuck in the harbor, unless you're, an astronaut, then you could get out of it, but you're coming right back. So everyone here is stuck on this planet. They're quarantined here on this planet. And the Bible James describes this morning, that all around us, we've got this infection, if you will, this infection of sin, this infection of worldliness that God calls us to be different from. He calls us to be those people in their cabin that are being extra careful to make sure that they don't come into contact, they don't come home stained with the coronavirus. He's saying God doesn't want you to be stained from this idea of worldliness, or this idea of becoming consumed with the things of the world, consumed with sin. So James chapter 4 is going to tell us here this morning that we need to be extra careful with our relationship with the world. We need to be extra careful that we are not just lackadaisically going around. I mean, think about those people on the ship. They're just walking around, rubbing their nose or putting their hands on their mouth or wiping their hand on the doorways and just I wonder what this tastes like. They're not doing that on the ship because they know the danger, if they know the danger that would come to them if they do that. And so James here is going to tell us there's danger of you being here on this planet, quarantined, if you will, on this world. There's so much out there that you can get stained from, that you can get sick from. And so being a friend of the world, being of the world is a dangerous thing to do. So he gives us that warning here this morning. He talks about being a friend of the world. He talks about your relationships are now altered because of that. You're not just being a friend of the world, but you're being a friend like the world. And so he gives us this picture here this morning as we continue our study in James chapter 4. So look at it with me. James chapter 4, look at verse 1. We're going to read down to verse 5 here. See what James has to say about this worldliness that can so easily entangle us if we are not careful. James chapter 4 verse 1 says, "What causes quarrels and fights among you? Is it not this that your passions are at war within you? You desire and you do not have, and so you murder. You covet and you cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. You do not have because you do not ask. You ask and do not receive because you ask wrongly and spend it on your own passions. You adulterous people. Do you not know that friendship with the world is now enmity with God? Therefore, whoever wishes to be a friend of the world now makes himself an enemy of God. Do you not suppose it is to no purpose that the Scripture says, he who yearns jealously over the Spirit that he has made to dwell in us?" There's lots of confusing phrases here in this text, but I want to break it down, and I want to show you that just like those people on that boat are being extra careful to not get stained with coronavirus, we need to be extra careful to not get stained with the world in our lives. And I want to look at verse 4 and 5 before we jump into the section, verse 1 through 3. So look back at verse 4. He calls these people, remember he's been calling them brothers, beloved, children. He's been calling all of these really nice words throughout this book. And so out of nowhere, he slaps them upside the face and calls them adulterous people because he's trying to warn them, hey, there's this thing called worldliness. Hey, there's this thing called the coronavirus that's out there that can take you down. And so you need to be extra careful with it. Being a friend of the world, having friendship with the world is enmity with God. There's great danger in you becoming a friend of the world. So right down this way for point number 1, I want you to reevaluate your relationship with the world. Point number 1, reevaluate your relationship with the world. If you think back to all these sermons that we've been talking about, James over and over and over again, he's been talking about sin. He's been talking about how we can be different than the world, how we need to act different from the world if we're real Christians. We looked last week at this godly wisdom, this real pure wisdom, and then this demonic, earthly, unspiritual wisdom. This wisdom, this fake sense of spirituality coming from you being obsessed with yourself, selfish ambition, bitter jealousy, all of these different things. And so here he's charging us. He's saying, what are you doing becoming friends with the world? It's really all about you. It's all about yourself. And if we think of worldliness, we take back and we look back and we take a definition of what is this idea of worldliness. And I would argue that worldliness is this love for, this adoration for the things of this world, for the sinful ways of this world, to be conformed to this world. I want to be like everyone else. I want to act like everyone else. I want to watch the movies that everyone else watches. I want to listen to the music everyone else wants to listen to. I don't want to look different from the world. That's this idea of worldliness. I think to some degree or another, every person in this room deals with that on some level. And so James here, he's telling you, hey, watch out. If you're going to do that, if you're going to be a friend of the world, he calls you an adulterous person, a cheater, an adulterer, someone that takes, you think of an adulterer as someone that goes outside of the confines of marriage. And so that you made a vow on your wedding day. You said, I'm not going to do that. And then an adulterer says, I lied there and I'm going to go do this somewhere else. And so that's cheating. And so all over the Bible, especially the Old Testament, Israel is called a prostitute or someone that is a cheater on God. God, he makes this relationship here with Israel. He says, I want you to be fully devoted to me. And what do? They start serving idols. We're going to read here in a couple days if you're doing the everyday in the Word. Exodus chapter 32, Moses, he goes up to Mount Sinai. He gets the 10 Commandments. He's with God. He's in the presence of God, all this great stuff. And he walks down the mountain, and what does he see? He sees his brother, Aaron, put together this golden calf. So all these people, they start worshiping this golden calf, and they start praising this golden calf. And that's a picture of this spiritual idolatry, but also spiritual adultery. These people are turning to other people or other gods rather than the one true God. So, I don't do that. I don't worship idols. I don't, go down the street to the Mormon temple. I don't go to the mosque. I don't, go to mass. Like, I'm not a different religion, Matt. Like, I'm a Christian, so I don't do that. I don't cheat on God like that with other religions or different idol worship or anything like that. But I think when it comes to worldliness, that's exactly what he's calling you out for. If you're doing anything, if you're putting anything above God, that's making an idol out of something. If you are worshiping and focusing your attention and your love and your adoration for anything other than God, that's what this idea of spiritual adultery is. You're cheating on God. You're an adulterer, is what this text says. If you are a friend of the world, if you now unify and identify yourself with the people of the world, the sin of the world, you love it, and you don't only love it, you don't only want it and desire it, but now you act like it, now you talk like it, now you live like it. I want you guys to flip on over a couple pages to the right to 1 John chapter 2. 1 John chapter 2. John here, he's basically trying to say the same thing to his audience. He's putting his finger in their chest and saying, hey, what are you doing trying to act like the world, trying to love the world, trying to live like the world? 1 John chapter 2. 1 John chapter 2, I want you to look at verse 15 through 17 with me. 1 John chapter 2, verse 15 through 17. John is very blunt, and he says this. He says, do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him, a.k.a. he's not a Christian, is what he's saying. For all that is in the world, he gives three things that the world is all about. They're all about these three things: the desires of the flesh, the desires of the eyes, and the pride of life. Is not the Father, but is from the world. It's not from the Father, but it is from the world. Those three things: desires of the flesh, desires of the eyes, and the pride of life. Verse 17, the world is passing away along with its desires, and whoever does the will of God abides forever. So what John's trying to do is trying to paint a picture here. This is the world. This is a Christian. And if you're a Christian, you can't sit here and look over at the world, what the world has, and say, hey, I want that. I desire that. I desire that. I want to be like that. I want to talk like that. I want to act like that. And so what you're doing in that is, again, what James says, you're cheating on God. You're an adulterer is what the way that James words it. And so really, those three things right there, if you look at that text, 1 John chapter 3, those three things: desires of the flesh, desires of the eyes, and the pride of life. That is what the world is all about. Desires of the flesh, that's the idea of your fleshly wantings and cravings. I mean, you think of, why people turn to alcohol, or why people turn to drugs or something, because it feels good. It's desires of my flesh. The desires of the eyes, that's this idea of this lustful thing. And I think we all understand that, the idea of looking at other people, specifically, most of the time we're talking about people of the different gender, where we want that. Oh man, I wish I could have that. I wish I could have that person. I wish I could be with that person. And you're thinking all of these sexual inappropriate thoughts about them. The world is all about that. Maybe in the church we don't talk about it. We wouldn't say that at church, but I've worked at a church. I've also worked in the corporate world when that's just like what people talk about. It's just the way of life. Oh man, that's just who we are. We want all these other people, desires of the eyes, and then the pride of life. We all want to make ourselves look good. And see, all of those three things, in some form or fashion, you, to some degree, want those things, right? I think we can all admit you want the desires of the flesh, you want the desires of the eyes, and you also want the pride of life. You want to be something. You want people to look at you and think, oh man, he's a big deal or she's a big deal. All of those things, they look good on the outside. And maybe those are the things that you're running after right now. Your life is living for those three things, to make yourself feel good. But we all know that those are empty promises. Last winter camp, we looked at the story of the prodigal son. Classic example. This guy, he goes out there, he spends all his money. He's got all the money. Who wants money? Everyone raises their hand. I want a lot of money. He goes out there and he spends it on all this stuff. Oh, who wants stuff? Oh, we all want stuff. He spends it on all these parties and all these extra crazy stuff. Prostitutes, he says. He just enjoys himself. and has just the time of his life. He wastes all this money, and where does he end up? In a kingdom somewhere, getting praised? Does he end up at the CEO of a really, expensive company? No, he ends up at a pig trough, eating the slop that the pigs are eating. He hits rock bottom. All of those things that he was looking at, oh man, I wish I could have that. Desires of the flesh, desires of the eyes, and the pride of life. I wish I could have all of those things. Where did it lead? It led to a pig trough. All three of those things are lies. They look good on the outside, but ultimately they're going to come back empty, just like the prodigal son. So a real Christian, they're not defined by these three things: desires of the flesh, desires of the eyes, and pride of life. They're not defined by those things. They're not running after those things anymore. They recognize those are a part of the world. Those are a part of the old system. Those are a part of my old self. And now I'm this new self. Now I'm living for God, and God is opposed to those things. And so now I'm going to live differently because of it. I'm going to choose God over the world. I'm going to choose God over myself, my flesh, my eyes, the pride of life. Real Christians able to really say no to those sins. James, he tells us those who choose to be friends with the world, choose to identify with the world, choose to go after the things that the world wants to go after. He says this, he says, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Therefore, whoever wishes to be a friend of the world, he makes himself an enemy of God. So you going after those things, the prodigal son running after those things, by doing that, you become an enemy of God. And that's one, I'd much rather be your enemy. I'd much rather be everyone else on this planet's enemy than God's enemy. That's not looking good for you if you're God's enemy, because we all know this. You come to God with sin on your own account. You show up at the throne room of heaven. You show up at the great white throne judgment, Revelation chapter 20. And what does he do? He opens the books. Revelation chapter 20, verse 12, it says, I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne, and the books were open, and the dead were judged by all that was written in the books according to everything that which they had done. If anyone's name was not written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. So we got these two books. One, book of life, name of all the Christians, all the people who really have a relationship with God, and then this other book that has every account of everything you've ever done, ever thought, ever said. And that's a scary thing. And if you are living of the world, you open that book, you're going to see a lot of worldly things, a lot of things that are opposed to God. And to be an enemy of God in that situation, what it says, you'll be thrown into the lake of fire. That's got to be the most scary reality of all time. Separation from God. Jesus weeping and gnashing of teeth, he says. Never ending. Eternity. We can't even fathom what that would be like. What we think going to class for an hour is long. Try eternity. Our minds can't even comprehend it. And that's what he says for those who live like the world. And ultimately, that's like you meeting something that is way more powerful than you. See, growing up in Southern California, and you too, we've all been to the beach before. We've all been to the beach. We've been out in the waves. When you look out at the horizon and you see that one wave that's way too big, and you're like, I'm too far from the shore. I can't get away from it. I can't swim back and get out of the water. That ginormous wave is going to hit me. And that feeling of you meeting something that is way more powerful than you, way bigger than you, has way more just girth and gravity to it. You look at that and you can't do anything, right? And if you grew up in California, you know what to do. You duck down, right? You go under the water and you lay on the sand, right? Is down as far down as you could possibly go, and you lay there and wait till the wave crushes you. And, I've been into those huge waves, and what happens? You're laying on the ground, and then it slams you into the sand, and then you get bounced around. You try to come up for air, and then it sucks you down, and you spin, and you're freaking out. You're like, I don't know which way is up. That's happened to every one of us in this room. And that's because you meet something that is way more powerful than you. You can't just stand up there with your arms crossed and say, come on, wave, come and hit me. I'm not going to fall over. If you do that to big wave, you're going to learn. You're going to learn today. You can't do that. You cannot do that. It's the same picture here with God. When you're meeting something so much more powerful, so much bigger, so much stronger and majestic, and so much more gravity than you can even fathom. When you meet a small little wave like that and you can't even survive that, how are you going to survive God when he's so much more powerful, so much bigger than that? I think you know it's not worth it. I think you know that the sin of this world is ultimately going to lead you to nothing, to no satisfaction, to no real tangible gain. So I ask you, why are you running after it? Why are you going for that? Why are you living your life for that? Living your life for the world. You see, real Christians, they decide to not be enemies of God and a friend of the world. They desire to do the opposite. I want to be a friend of God and an enemy of the world. I'm going to choose to stand with God. See, Jesus describes what happens to a real Christian, their relationship with the world in John chapter 17, verse 14. John 17, verse 14, Jesus talking to his disciples, talking to Christians, he says this. He says, the world has hated them or hated you because you are not of the world, just as I am not of the world. We are different, is what Jesus says. So when Jesus shows up, he's different than the world. They crucify him. When you show up to the world, well, you're here. You don't show up to the world. You're right here. You're an enemy of the world. You're different than the world. You like light and darkness. Light and darkness, they come together. And a good picture I always think of is like you shine a light on like a group of like cockroaches or something like that. Like, oh, disgusting. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen that happen. Like you turn the light on when you've got cockroaches everywhere. What do? They scatter and they run. And see, that's what the world does when a Christian shows up. Maybe they don't actually physically run away from you, but they don't want to hang out with you. They don't want to be with you. Because, why? Because you're different. You're like light in the darkness, and you're like, oh, man. Karina, she's like blind, and so her phone, she puts it on full brightness, even at night when we're about to go to bed, and then she's like, hey, look at this, and I'm like, oh, my goodness. I'm like, what? And what do you do? Like, mine's on the lowest brightness if possible, and, like, I have everything blacked out. Like, I do the black and not the white on my phone, and she does white everything, brightness fully up. It's midnight, and you're like, holy smokes, my eyes just got burned up. That's this picture of light and darkness coming together. When you're in the dark and the light shows up, you don't want to be there. I want to get away from this. Flip your phone over. Like, I don't want to look at whatever you're looking at because it hurts. I want to get away from it. That's the picture of this world, this light and darkness here in this world. Jesus says you're going to be an enemy of the world. That's what you're signing up for when you choose to be a friend of God. So how do we be a friend of God? If you're still in James, I want you to flip one page to the left probably. We looked at this a few months ago. James describes how to become a friend of God. He uses the example of Abraham here. James chapter 2, look at verse 23. It says this. It says, Scripture is fulfilled, and it says, Abraham, he believed God, and it was counted to him as righteousness, and he was called a friend of God. So Abraham there, he believes God, he puts his faith in God, and now he's renouncing the world, he's choosing God, and he's saying, I'm living for him now, and now God calls him a friend because he chooses he chooses God over the world. And he becomes a friend of God. It's as simple as that. And I know we say it all the time, but it's as simple as faith. That's how you become a Christian. You just have faith. Abraham, it says he believed in God, and it was counted to him as righteousness. He was counted completely clean, completely righteous before God because he put his faith in God, because he believed in God, not in himself anymore for being a good person or a good church kid, but now believing in ultimately Jesus, but in his case, in God the Father. And then what does that result in? It results in you now being different from the world. So that's where you get our word repentance. You're looking different than the world. You become a Christian by faith, and now there's this repentance process, if you will, where now I want the world. I want to not look like the world anymore. I'm putting off the works of the flesh. Siding with God, not siding with the world. You see, God doesn't want it any other way. Look back at James 4. Look at verse 5 here with me. A little confusing when you read it at first glance, but James chapter 4, verse 5 says, do you not suppose it is to no purpose that the scripture says, he yearns jealously over the spirit that he has made to dwell in us. There's a really confusing verse in the Greek. You can't really figure out what's the subject, what's the object of the sentence here. It's a little confusing. But I think the way that we can read this is that there's God. He's jealous for us, for the Spirit that's inside of us. He's jealous for your life, as I think what this verse is trying to tell us. God is jealous for you. He is jealous for your life, for your full attention, for your full submission. Going back to that picture and that idea of adultery, the cheating on God. He's jealous for you. He doesn't want you to do that. You don't get married so that your spouse can go cheat on you. That's not why you get married. That's why Ephesians chapter 5 describes the church and Jesus as getting married, the bride in the room. He doesn't want his bride to just go cheat on him, to just go waste my life in sin after being saved. That's not what he's called you to do. He's called you to be faithful because he's jealous for you. He wants you. Think about the first 2 commandments, 10 commandments. What's number 1? You have no other God before him, right? No other gods before him. What's number 2? You shall not worship idols. So these 2 things are all about the jealousy of God. God wants you. He wants your attention. He wants your worship. He wants your life. And so what you got to do is you got to define really your relationship with the world. Define your relationship. We talk about that in like dating relationships, right? You got to do your DTR, determine it's Bible school term, sorry. But you always got a DTR, like what's the status of our relationship here? You got a DTR here with the world. What is my relationship with the world? You can't be friends with the world and friends with God. It's one or the other. Friend of the world, enemy of God. Friend of God, enemy of the world. That's your decision here today. And if you're sitting here, I want to live for God alone. I don't want to be God's enemy. I mean, ultimately, who does? But when you say I'm siding with the world, you're signing up saying, sign my name. I want to be an enemy of God. That's what you're saying when you sign up with the world. I want to be an enemy of God. You stand up to the wave. God, the wave, like, come, wave, big wave, hit me. That's what you're saying to God. God, come on, judge me. Come on, do it. Let's see it happen. That's what you're saying when you reject God, when you become when you choose the world over God. And so if you're sitting here this morning, you're like, I want to live for God. I don't want to live for the world. I want to choose God instead of the world. He gives a great picture here in the book of Romans. You don't need to turn there, but Romans chapter 12. I want you to write it down. Romans chapter 12, verse 1 and 2. Paul, he says this, he's appealing. He says, I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice. Now you belong to God, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Then he says this, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. If you're a Christian, you are asking God to renew your mind, to not love the things of the world anymore, to not love the desires of the flesh, desires of the eyes, and the pride of life. Saying, I want the renewing of my mind to now transform me to love God, to love his commandments. So you can't sit here and say, I want to be a Christian. I really want to love God. I want to be that living sacrifice. But you know what? The world, like, the music is really good. I love listening to the world's music. And it's I know it's bad. Like, I know it says explicit next to the name. Like, but whatever. Like, it's just whatever. Not a big deal. Oh, I want to watch the world's movies. Man, they're just so funny. Like, look at them. They're just awesome. The culture, the world's vocabulary. I want to use the words that the world uses. I want to act. I want to dress like the world dresses. I want the attitude that the world has. All about myself. That doesn't sound like being transformed by the renewal of your mind. If the command for you is to not be conformed to this world, you cannot be content with any part of worldliness, any stain of worldliness in your life. Because if you're saying, I want a little bit of both, then you're the guy on the ship, on the coronavirus ship, just walking around, just moving your hands on the doorknobs and licking your fingers and picking your nose and trying to get the coronavirus. That's what you're doing when you're just careless about it. If you're on that ship, you got to be very careful. You got to be extra alert. And if you're a Christian, you got to be extra alert with the stains of this world. He calls you an adulterer if you choose the world over him. And so if you are someone that does choose the world, or even if you are someone that chooses God and says, I want to live for him, not the world, you're still going to struggle with this idea of selfishness, because all of us, our hearts are all programmed to be all about you. They're all about what I can get out of it. And that's really the spirit of the way that the world lives and the way that the world operates is all about you. It's all about yourself. Love yourself, right? That's what everyone says now. I love myself. It's like, I don't know what that means. Like, I just don't understand that saying at all. It's all about you is what the world will tell you. And so being in this world, we can now be somewhat conditioned. We can somewhat be like the person walking around the cabin of the ship and somehow get infected a little bit with the world in terms of our relationships with other people. We treat our relationships with other people the way that the world treats relationships. And see, I think it's a grave danger really to the church. I mean, I think about just the history of the church. It's not been just a smooth sailing. It's been a lot of controversy. It's been a lot of division. There's who knows how many denominations, right? What's a denomination? It's basically someone saying, I don't agree with you on this. It's division, right? And so we've got all these denominations. We've got all these people that don't agree with each other. You go to church and people say, oh, church is messy. People get mad at each other. They gossip about each other, and then they gossip about the pastor and different people in the church, and then churches blow up, and pastors leave, and churches just dissimulate. And so the world, they look at the church and they say, why does the church look no different than the world? Like I said, I've worked in the church, I've worked in the world. The world it's always tearing people down. It's always talking bad about other people. It's always treating people in a way that you are trying to get something out of it. What I mean by that is it's all about you. Your friendships are all about you. It's all about connections. See, the church should look different if it's full of people that are saying, I want to stand with God and not with the world. We're sitting here bringing the coronavirus in. He says, no, you can't do that. You got to be pure of that. You can't let this selfishness reign supreme here in the church. I love what he says in 1 Corinthians chapter 1. 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 10. Paul says, he said, I appeal to you, brothers, by the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, that you all agree and there be no divisions among you, that you may be united in the same mind and the same judgment. See, so easily this division, so easily this conflict can happen in our world. We start to act like the world here at church. When you're a friend of the world, or even if you're not a friend of the world, you're an enemy of the world, we still have this selfishness that now permeates into the church, into your relationships with other people here in this room, and it causes conflict, it causes fights, it causes divisions. It's exactly what James here is addressing. If you look back at James 4, look at verse 1 here with me. We'll tackle the first 3 verses here, this chapter. It says, talking about people who really are living like the world, who are letting worldliness take over their relationships at church, is what he's trying to paint a picture of. James chapter 4, verse 1, he says, what causes quarrels and fights among you? Is it not this, that your passions are at war within you? You desire and you do not have, and so you murder, and you covet, and you cannot obtain, and so you fight and you quarrel. You do not have because you do not ask, and you ask and do not receive because you ask wrongly and spend it on your own passions. This whole section here is about selfishness. It's all about what I'm getting out of it, and ultimately that lends itself to now my relationships are being fragmented and hurt. I think the overarching theme of those 3 verses is you need to start fighting your selfishness. So write it down this way for point number 2. Fight your selfishness instead of each other. Fight your selfishness instead of each other. See, this whole idea of conflict, this whole idea of division here within the church, when worldliness comes into the church, if you think about conflict, it's all about you. It's all about selfishness. It's all about what you can get out of it. Think about every fight you've ever had. Every fight you've ever had. What is the common denominator in every one of those fights? You, right? Every fight you've ever been in, you're always in the middle of every single one of them, right? You're the common denominator. You're the problem is really what I'm trying to say. And so if you think about it, there's never been a conflict. There's never been a fight in your life where you are 0% to blame. Oh, someone wronged me. Well, okay, if you're selfless, if you're not a selfish person, then you're willing to accept, you're willing to forgive, you're willing to forbear with them. Selfishness is the reason that fights happen. What causes these quarrels and fights among you? It's not that your passions are at war within you. What he's trying to say here is you've got all these different things going on inside of you that you're fighting against. You're fighting your selfishness with your selflessness. The world and God, they're fighting together within you is basically what he's trying to say. So I was thinking about it this week as, I'm preparing this sermon, and I'm thinking about conflict, and I'm thinking about, getting upset at other people or fighting, and, what did Satan try to do? He tried to put all of these different things in my life this week that try to make me have conflict, make me get mad at other people. And so I'm studying for this text, and these things are popping up in my life, and I'm thinking through it, and I'm thinking through it through the lens of this sermon here. And it helped open up a whole new world. Like, I understand conflicts way better after this week, honestly. And it's because I looked at every issue I've had this week. It's all been about me, defending myself, defending my pride. Every fight you've ever been in with your parents. When was the last time you fought with your parents? This morning on the way to church? Like, when did you last fight with your parents? Why did you fight with them? Because you want what you want, right? It's all about you. It's all about selfishness. You're defending your pride, defending your, what you've done, defending yourself with arguments or whatever. It's all about you getting what you want. Flip on over to Philippians chapter 2. Philippians chapter 2, a couple pages to the left here. Paul here, he cares for this church in Philippi, and they're not getting along. There are a lot of people here in this church that are not getting along. And he pens this letter to them, and he's just basically pouring out his heart, saying, please, guys, just get along. It's like when your dad or your mom, like you and your brother or your sister are fighting, and what do they say? Just get along, right? Why can't you just get along? That's what Paul is doing here. He said, you need to get along. Philippians chapter 2, look at verse 1. He says this, if there's any encouragement in Christ, any comfort in love, any participation in the Spirit, any affection or sympathy, complete my joy. Make me happy is what he's saying. By being of the same mind, having the same love, being in full accord and of one mind. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others as more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interest, but also to the interest of others. He's pouring out his heart. He's saying, guys, just get along. And he's saying, just count other people as more significant than yourself. Look not at your selfish ambition, what you can get out of this fight, what you can get out of this conflict. Oh, my mom's wrong. Oh, I don't care. You can be the bigger man. You can be the bigger woman. And I'm just going to forbear it. I'm just going to forgive. I'm just going to, friend at school, they hurt me. They gossip about me. Can I be mad at them because they said this false thing about me? No. Conflict happens because we're selfish, because it's all about what we can get out of it. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others as more significant than yourselves. If you did that this week, you're not going to get in any conflict. And I know that's a big statement. That is a big statement. I just said you won't get in any conflict this week. Like, wow, televangelist. Like, that's a big promise right there. I'm serious when I say it. You won't get in conflict this week if you truly do this verse right here. If you truly say, I'm not going to have selfish ambition at all. I'm going to put off my selfishness. I'm going to fight my selfishness instead of other people. If you really did that, you won't get in any conflict this week. Because selflessness is what? It's patience. It's compassion. It's empathy. It's sympathy. It's forbearing. It's forgiving. All of those fruit of the Spirit that we've talked about, it's all in the category of selflessness. We got to do that. We got to stop thinking about ourselves more important than everyone else. We got to look to the interests of others as more important than ourselves. He says this weird thing back in James chapter 4. He talks about murdering, and he talks about, what are you talking about with desiring and do not having, so you murder? I didn't do that this week. Coveting and you can't obtain, so you fight and you quarrel about it. Well, I don't know if that happened this week. Well, what he's trying to say here is that ultimately, when you're in conflict with other people, it's because you're in some form or fashion, you are not fulfilled. You don't have something that you want. Again, going back to that selfishness idea. What can I get out of it? Murder, it's like, okay, that's the extreme example. And Jesus, he uses that in the Sermon on the Mount. is if you get angry with someone else, you murder them, is what he's saying. Because ultimately, murder happens because what? Because someone's anger goes unchecked, 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 and then boom, murder happens. Like, wow, like I didn't do that this week. Like, okay, good, I'm glad you stopped it somewhere along this path here. We still got to make sure that our anger, our upset with other people, it doesn't go unchecked like that. You can't leave sin unchecked. So this week when you come into conflict with your parents and you're in the middle of your video game and you can't pause it, and your mom wants you to come to dinner, or your mom wants you to do your homework, what does selfishness say? Selfishness says, no, Mom, I'm not done. I'm not done with my game yet. Let me finish. And then what happens? You get in an argument when you tell your mom, let me finish, and then she gets mad at that, and then you guys get in an argument and a conflict. Why? Because it's about you. We're fighting the selfishness. You're not going to get in the conflict. You're fighting selfishness. You're not going to get in the conflict. Friend at school. Oh, man, they did this. They said this. They texted this. They Snapchatted this. And it makes me mad. Well, if you take yourself out of it, if you say, I'm going to commit to selflessness instead of selfishness, you're not going to get into a big argument, a big fight about it. See, we all have conflict. We all have gotten in fights before, and it really does, it seems like it can't be this simple to just be selfless. But really, that is what it is. That is as easy as it is. Selflessness. So if you commit to that, God will help you not get in those fights, not get in those quarrels, not letting the coronavirus, if you will, now impede on your relationships with other people. But it seems very odd. He starts talking about praying out of nowhere. In verse 3, he says, you ask and you do not receive because you ask wrongly and spend it on your own passions. He's talking about prayer in that verse. Like, what does prayer have to do with this? Well, I think prayer has a lot to do with this, because what if you were praying about those conflicts? What if you were praying about selflessness? What if you were praying in the right way rather than praying in wrong or selfish ways? Again, verse 3, it's about praying selfishly. Just a couple weeks ago, I know some of you were there, but the baptism service, Matthew got baptized at it, and he said one line in there that I thought was very, very profound. He said, after he was talking about I got saved, he said, I started to realize that I didn't just pray to get things. I thought, wow, like that right there, selfish praying. That's verse 3 right here. I didn't just pray to get things, but now I pray because I love God. And I pray because I want to have a relationship with God. I pray now for things that are now according to His will, not just get me through this test, get me through this tournament, get me through this game, get me through this practice, get me through this relationship with my mom or whatever. That's praying selfishly, putting yourself higher than anything else. And when selfishness breeds into your prayer life, then you're gonna have conflict. But if we commit to praying in a way that God tells us to pray, praying for the things that God wants us to pray for, things that are in accordance with His will, Jesus says, John chapter 14, He says, if you ask anything in my name, I will do it. That's another big promise right there. If you ask anything in my name that is according to my will, I will do it, He says. If you prayed this week about your conflicts with your mom or your dad or your siblings or your friends at school or your friends here, I guarantee you those are going to start to dissipate because if you're praying for something that God wants, is God going to give it to you? The answer is yes. He is going to give it to you. Another big promise right there. But your conflicts can be avoided if you're praying selflessly, if you're praying for your selfishness to die. If you're praying, God, help me not be a friend of the world so that I don't become a friend like the world. If you're praying for those things, putting off selfish ambition, you're going to see those conflicts in your life slow down or stop. See, you need to make a choice. I was reminded of that this week as I was thinking about the story of the Alamo. You guys know the story of the Alamo? Like the San Antonio, the Alamo down there. So back in the 1800s, the Texans, they were their own thing at that point. They were fighting against the Mexicans. So we got the Texans versus the Mexicans. And so there were a couple Texan like rebels that were stationed there in the Alamo. And there's about 200 of them. And then there's this army of Mexicans led by General Santa Anna, like the OG Santa Anna, like that guy. Spelled it differently, but whatever. 2 N's instead of 1. But General Santa Anna, he had I think 1,500 people. And they're sitting there. He waves up a red flag, which means we're not going to take any prisoners. And so these guys, these Texans, these 200 people, going to try to fight these 1,500 people. And there's this guy, there's a couple guys, famous guys like Davy Crockett and James Bowie, but this guy named William Travis, who supposedly this is what he did. And it's a legend, so we can't fully know because everyone died. But the legend has it that he took his sword out and he stepped back. Maybe you've seen the Disney movie or something like that. There's a Disney movie that does this. I don't know what it is. Shout out to Disney Plus. You can probably find it on there. But he takes his sword and he draws a line here in the sand and he says, we're all going to die, okay? It's just a given. 200 people can't beat 1,500 people. We're all going to die. But you can choose right now to go home, and we're not going to call you a coward. We're not going to think you're a loser. You can go home right now. But if you cross this line, you're staying until death. Your death sentence is walking over this line. And he drew this line in sand. He said, you have a choice. And supposedly, every person except for one person, every person except one coward, sorry, I guess we know him now, but there's one guy that did it. But everyone else, they stepped across that line and they died there at the Alamo. And I think what a powerful statement by that guy. Just, you walk across this line, you're committing a full commit. I'm going to die with these people. I'm going to fight till the death. And they did. They took their death sentence, they walked over the line, and all these Texans, they died. I think that's kind of the same picture that James is painting here in our passage. He's drawing a line in the sand. He's saying, hey, you can go. You can go home and go have fun. Go live the way that you want to live. Go live like the world. Do it. But you can step across this line, commit to stay here with me. Instead of fighting the Mexicans in this case, you can fight your selfishness. You can fight against your own sinful desire, ultimately to the death, if you will. There's a choice. Side with the world, go home. Seriously, go home. Have fun. Go do it. Or you step across this line and say, I'm not going to be a friend of the world anymore. I want to be a friend of God. And yeah, I know it's going to cost me. I know it's scary. I know that I'm going to have to say no to my sin for the rest of my life. I get it. But you step across that line, and that death sentence, if you will, it's a lot better than the death sentence that those couple of Texans had. Make the choice. Don't sit here and be non-committal. Don't sit here and be like, I don't know, I'll just straddle the line. No, there's no straddling the line. There's hopping over it, or there's not crossing it. So you got to make up your mind, and I think that's what James is trying to tell us. Go after the world, sure. Go be a friend of the world. But if you do that, you're going to be an enemy of God, is what he says. I think days like today are good reminders for us all. I think it's a good question for us to ask. What are we going to do about this text? What are we going to do about this question? What are you going to do? Are you going to be a friend of the world, choose to go home and have fun? Or are you going to choose to be a friend of God and be an enemy of the world? If you guys would bow your heads right now and pray with me. Let's talk to God. God, we are so thankful and so indebted to you that you would send your Son to save us from our sin, so that we no longer have to be captive to the world, so that we no longer have to be entrenched and enslaved to our sin anymore. God, and I know that this picture of this line in the sand is a scary one. And I know that the easy thing to do is just go home and not do anything about it. God, I would pray for the students here in this room that are not right with you, that know that they are friends of the world and not friends of God, not friends of you. I pray that you would convict them this morning to tell them or show them that they need to ultimately step across that line, no longer need to be non-committal, just push it down the road. Just act like I'll worry about it when I get to college, or I'll worry about it when I, become a parent or get married or something like that. God, I pray that you would convict some of these students to the point of jumping over that line today, getting right with you right now. God, I pray for that to become a reality. God, we love you. We're thankful for your word and for how convicting it is. God, I pray for each and every student here in this room that have stepped across this line, every leader in this room that has stepped across that line. God, I pray that you would help us stay unstained from the world, that we would renounce godliness, that we would not be conformed to the world, but we would be transformed by the renewal of our minds each and every day. God, we love you, and we want to live for you, and we want to praise you right now. We pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.